Welcome. I am here today with Sigourney Bell, who is my teacher of spinal attunement. She is an intuitive and medical medium and author of The Mother Wild Revolution. She is the founder of Soma Mystica, which is a global training institute that fuses neuroscience and spiritual teachings with a particular passion and expertise in matriarchal medicine. So, welcome, Sigourney.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And finally,
Amazing.
we're doing it. We've
Yeah,
been trying to arrange this for some time.
exactly. I'm so glad you're here. I feel my whole world was changed by learning under you and really having an initiation into the energy field, working in the auric field and on the energetic frequency that changed and up-leveled my own experience and within my own body and the healing capacity I have. And I just can't wait to hear more about your wisdom and what is ripe for you in terms of motherhood, energy, spiritual, emotional healing capacities. So, yeah, would you like to share anything to start about just what's alive for you right now?
What's alive for me right now? What's alive for me right now? There's a lot alive for me right
Well,
now.
as it pertains to this work.
Yeah, I think I want to just come back to our conversation, the one that we had just before we jumped on the podcast, which was, the beauty and the gift of having children in this age. Um, when there's so much, global crisis, polycrisis, and so much external noise, and so many things that can take us away from the self, is the gift and beauty of having children and what that does to our focus. It really brings us into the present moment, into like you don't really have the capacity to hold as much, and to hold as much collective weather, and that can actually be such a gift during these times. And I'm really finding that at the moment in my personal journey. I feel like I'm at a stage where I'm, minimizing my travel and feeling like more and more like I just want to plant my roots in local community. And I feel like that's, that evolution is coming from my motherhood journey, actually, and my desire to, and also lack of ability to hold so much. I'm used to traveling and running a business and doing so many different things. And yeah, it's only really lately, like at my fourth year of mothering, that I feel my capacity lessening, actually. And that's actually a really beautiful gift because it does allow me to be more present. So
Yeah,
that's what's alive for me at the moment.
amazing. I love that. I feel like motherhood can be so anchoring in ways, even as much as it can also be chaotic and breaking you open and that there just are seasons of that and what's possible based on like what you need as a mother and what your children are asking to come through you. So I love to hear that. Well, let's talk about the energetics of motherhood. Most of
Mm.
society really tends to look at birth and the emergence into motherhood as a physical and medical event. But from your work in spinal attunement and all the esoteric teachings that you bring into the world, what do you see happening in a woman's energy system the moment she becomes a mother? And why does our culture seem to be almost entirely unaware of it?
Yeah, it's interesting, like the medical field does focus, just on the physical, but in a way they also don't. Like, there's not many teachings or, education around the fact that physiologically, actually, the whole, like, nervous system of a mother completely changes and goes through a massive initiation called matrescence, which is similar, if not stronger, than the rite of passage of adolescence
Hmm.
and the changes in the brain and the nervous system that happen during adolescence. Um, so I'll just framing this first because, the whole energetic system is not separate from the physiological system. It is an extension of the physiological system. So to talk about the energetic changes, we kind of have to also talk about the neurophysiological changes that happen in the maternal brain and the maternal nervous system. So, like, for example, when we're going through matrescence, our whole brain rewires itself. So we see this, like, what's called a synaptic pruning process, where, like, neurons are literally trimmed from the more logical parts of the brain, so the prefrontal cortex. We lose innovation to these parts, and preferentially we gain all of these new synaptic connections in, like, the deep limbic system and the deep, like, more instinctual brain, which is basically our intelligence to basically bring the mother into this new rite of passage of, like, caretaking. So it starts to wire all the, instinctual parts of the brain so that we have, like, stronger protective instincts. Because we're not designed to, be out there, like, continuing on our work as we were, particularly during pregnancy and early postpartum. We're meant to be really dialing in and focusing on protecting this child who's extremely vulnerable. And that's the whole mechanism of this neurobiological change. So, like, when we speak of baby brain, it's like, well, actually, yeah, we do have, in a way, baby brain, because our brain becomes wired to actually mirror the child's. So in a way, we do develop this kind of, like, more of an infantile brain, but more of an intelligent instinctual reflex to be able to actually entrain and mirror our child so that we know what they're needing at all times. In a similar way to, like, how our breast milk, if our child's sick, then we get feedback through their saliva and we produce the antibodies that the child needs through our milk, and we're always entraining to the child's immune system. Well, our brain and our whole nervous system entrains to theirs. And so we become younger in a sense. But in many ways, we become older and more ancient and progressed because, we're able to, like, feel every subtle, like, energetic impulse. Our child can be miles away and we can, like, feel everything that's happening in their system. And so our energetic bodies, not only are our, like, neurosystems merged during pregnancy and, like, particularly the first 2 years, that critical window, but our energetic system is entirely merged for those first 2 years. And actually, like, the child's brain by design is, like, compared to other mammals, is one of the smallest, most underdeveloped brains compared to the adult brain at childbirth, at the time that they're born. And that's by design because it's meant to grow in relationship with the mother and develop in relationship with the mother in the first 2 years, which is like basically like an intense pressure cooker of neurodevelopment where they're like, go through this accelerator portal of nervous system development. So they call it the critical window, and it's really where, like, yeah, it's so important for a mother to be available to their child and entrained to their child and meeting that child's needs because, they can't communicate, they can't meet their own needs. And that's when we get to teach them that, they're worthy of having their needs met, and teach them safety and, through co-regulation. So, yeah, the energetic system is, just an extension of the neuroendocrine system. It's the nervous system that creates the electrical current that creates the field. So, they're one for those first 2 years, and then we start to, the child goes through their Mars return at 2, every 2 years roughly, and so that Mars return starts to break the field and break the energetic container between mother and baby, and that's when, we see the toddler tantrums and the no's and, like, that first kind of sense of, like, I have a self at 2 and the terrible twos. And that's that Mars return period where they start to actually break that energetic field and start to develop their own energetic field. But before the age of 2, there's no sense of self. There's no separation. And so we need to treat them in that way. We need to like actually learn that or understand that and educate ourselves on the fact that, yeah, that child is a direct mirror of us in the first 2 years. So everything we feel, think, our state, our nervous system state directly translates to what they take on and how they feel and how they think,
Yeah.
and the development of their nervous system. There was just recently in 2024 a study that showed that during pregnancy in the first 2 years postpartum, the heart rate variability of the mother and the child is in complete mirror. And the heart rate variability is basically like the strongest reflection of what's happening in the autonomic nervous system, so the
Mhm.
unconscious nervous system, which controls like our sense of safety, and um, all of our vital functions, like our heart rate, our breath rate, etc.
Mm.
About the autonomic nervous system, but yeah, like a mother's autonomic nervous system basically creates the child's autonomic nervous system, which governs, you know, so much, like our sleep cycles, our ability to stay or like develop nervous system resilience and regulation. And so, in some ways, like everything that we experience later in life is set up from those first years.
Mm.
Um, and so I'm just so passionate about this because we can, set our children up for life if we understand how to, regulate and our own nervous system in during pregnancy and those first 2 years postpartum,
Yeah.
and develop a strong sense of safety internally and also connection to our child and ability to co-regulate with them and help them feel safe and so on. So
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I feel it just drives me up the wall when I hear people say about a baby, like, they're just a blob. They don't understand, or, create conditions of separation from mother because they won't remember or they don't know, but it's just not true. And we see that in the neurobiology so consistently across data. But why is it that people are so unaware of this?
yeah, I want to like it feels more like a systemic issue.
Yeah,
I
who
think we can
benefits from us being, from that not being honored as a sacred truth is maybe more the question.
It's interesting because, recently I've been writing a few articles on this and like the importance of, you know, co-parenting in co-regulation, the importance of staying at home during those that critical window and maintaining a really strong connection between mother and child if that's, possible. And I've had a lot of like feedback about how privileged that is and
Mm,
how you know not everyone's able to do that. And I think, yeah, but actually it's the most some of the most unprivileged people in the world that are actually doing this and maintaining this as a philosophy. Like if you go to third world countries, this is how they operate.
mhm,
They don't the child stays on them, they baby wear the child for the first
mhm,
years of their life, and they do this in village and in community. So actually, I don't think the privilege stance holds.
mhm. Yeah, we have, like, a whole
Um
systemic force that really serves to disrupt the mother's intuition when it comes to staying connection with the baby. And it starts, honestly, before you even give birth, I think that really disrupts that and really calls into question a mother's intuition. It kind of lays this map during what I see as like this prime imprinting space where like mother's states of consciousness in pregnancy are prime for mapping like new ways of thinking and feeling we're in those deeper states of consciousness and what's happening rather than like harnessing that intuitive power is like destroying it and fragmenting it, questioning it, and even fear mongering, that your baby won't be safe and things like that. And it's pretty wild.
It is wild. And I feel like, yeah, they're going back to, when I'm saying it's systemic, there's so many systemic fractures that have
Yeah.
led to this point. It's not one single event that we can pinpoint it on, started, well, like even if we just look at the agriculture, the revolution back then of like moving from a more instinctual way of being to starting to have to learn to farm, like that in itself started to change the nature of our nervous system and bring us more into the prefrontal cortex. And
Mm.
then, the age of industrialization, and then also, of course, like patriarchal conditioning through religion. And there's so many layers to why the feminine body is demonized and basically disrespected, and medicalization, sterilization. There's so many points in history where this is basically fractured and created this way of being, mostly in the West.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it is a privileged position in the West to be able to do this, because our environment circumstances are not really often set up to allow women to stay at home and be with their children. There's such a
Yeah.
pressure to go back to work, and there's all of this underlying patriarchal conditioning in our nervous system, embedded in our nervous system. But I would say in general, it's not a privileged position. And it
Mhm.
takes a lot of unlearning for a woman to really be able to mother in this way.
Yeah. Well, when a mother cannot be present in this way or give the nurture and kind of respond to her intuitive and instinctual capacity in birth and pregnancy and postpartum and give that early nurture, what do you actually see in her energy field over time? Like, where does the dissonance live? What does it cost her over the years and decades if it goes unattended?
It's huge. I mean, we can just look at the prevalence of, what we call mother guilt, to start with. Like, a lot of mothers talk about this mother guilt, and I feel like it's something that's kind of inherent within the mother wound, but I feel like it's also a bit of a intelligent response to actually keeping a mother in unison with their child. So I would say I didn't experience a lot of mother guilt personally, because I actually preferentially kind of chose to uh, cut back on my work and stay at home for those first 2 years, which was totally against my own personal desires, because I'm highly creative and entrepreneurial and love being out there in the world. And it was really, really hard for me actually to do that and to reroute my whole life in that way. However, it felt instinctually right. Like, there was
Mm,
every part of me knew that I had to do that, even though it was so challenging. And so I didn't really experience so much mother guilt, because I was really preferentially, you know, putting my daughter first in those first couple of years. And what I see is a lot of women experience mother guilt, and it's actually their instinct going, I actually feel like I need to be doing and giving more. And in often, I shouldn't say it's always the case, but often um, is actually trying to draw them back into that connection.
mm,
And I would say, I've seen mothers that just go back into the workforce, and I'm not trying to guilt or shame anyone here on their choices at all. I just want to say that I know that it's such a challenging journey, and it's so different for everyone. um, However, what I would say is, when I see women that do go back into the workforce and override their instinctual responses, they basically have to cut themselves off from their bodies. And,
mm,
because their body is still, their instincts are still there. They're still connected to their child. It's just they're not actually honoring them. So, burnout is a really big one. And burnout is prevalent in mothers postpartum anyway, because the child, you know, basically like sucks the minerals out of our body, particularly for breastfeeding. We have to mineralize our system and nourish our system so much more in that window. So we're already kind of our baseline, like, is like lower. Baseline capacity is lower. And so if we're also separating ourselves out from what our body is naturally wanting to do, which is to be in this, co-regulatory relationship, then our body goes into fight or flight,
Mhm.
and starts to like signal danger. And we basically then end up in this autonomic burnout response.
Yeah. Yeah, or I see in freeze and collapse so much in moms, like especially functional freeze
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
mothers because you kind of have to keep on getting on, but you're actually really disconnected and
Yeah.
um, not in a space where you can have that flexibility. And the guilt thing
Yeah.
is so interesting too, because my understanding with guilt is that the purpose at the root of the emotion of guilt is kind of a tribal response. It's like self responsibility and doing what's best for the good of the tribe or others. And, at its core, it's one of our earlier developed emotional
Mm.
complexes. And it kind of signals how really a mother's guilt at its core is related to the collective whole on some level, like the collective well-being for her to just be present with her child. Like they are interdependent.
Mm.
And I think we're seeing the effects of that on a large scale in society now of like what the mother wound and disruption of the mother child bond, how that
Mm.
plays out over generations of time. We're kind of living out that reality. It's astonishing.
Mm. It really is. I mean, like, before I journeyed into motherhood, I really had no idea. Like, I wasn't even planning on having my daughter. She was a bit of a surprise for me, and I wouldn't have said that I was overly maternal at all. Like, I'd held maybe 2 babies. Um, I didn't have any close friends with children. I had no idea what I was doing, but, I guess the grace was that I had been doing years of feminine embodiment work, and,
Yeah.
I am in this field of, like, somatics, and so, my nervous system was already kind of, uh, like, functioning in a way that it just naturally was able to orientate towards this more instinctual self when I
Yeah.
had my daughter. So it was just more of an intelligent response that I was able to respond to, because otherwise I would have been like, what am I doing? No idea. It's really only been postpartum that I've really dived into the studies of matrescence and matriarchal medicine and like really learnt about, you know, the processes that I went through.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow, it's powerful. It's like because you've mapped this, and I do see this with clients and with mothers, and it's like when you've sort of mapped that intuitive capacity and owned it and embodied it, then yeah, the instincts of motherhood coming online can feel a lot more seamless and you're open because you've
Totally.
had those profound intuitive experiences before.
Yep.
Um, but I also notice that, because there's so much shifting in the brain and the nervous system and energetically within the, ancestral lineage and things that it also can kind of uh, revisit old trauma and pain that we have to face down
Whew.
in entirely new ways.
Yeah, yeah, I would say it's like not only, like preparation can be sure nervous system work and learning about the nervous system, learning about somatics and, uh, somatic experiencing, for example, is a great modality that can teach you how to entrain um, and learn about the nervous system from a more embodied perspective. But it's also a shamanic deep dive, right? As you're saying. So it's like, yeah, there's so much nervous system work you can do, but it is a total breaking open and shattering of the ego self. And yeah, there's just also no preparing you in a sense, like, other
No,
than shamanic death processes themselves, I think, um, uh, by nature, my design is, 5 planets Scorpio, 4 planets Capricorn, all in the lower half of my chart. So by design, I'm just always deep diving. Um, and yeah, motherhood was, well, I would say I've had one other parallel experience, and that was drug induced psychosis for 2 years at 21. If I can give you any comparison as to how intense motherhood was.
oh my gosh.
But it's like, yeah, it's because you're going through that whole intense rewiring, like physiological
Yeah.
rewiring. It's like it is this ego death that you cannot actually control.
You
Um,
can't control it and you can't
you
really
can't control
escape
it.
from it. Like it's so embodied too. And when, you're having, for example, a plant medicine experience, like there is a start and there is an end to a certain degree. What I'm
Mhm.
hearing this parallel between your two experiences is that if you're having drug induced psychosis versus, the ego death of motherhood, it's like you really don't know when that's going to change or evolve or end. And when you're a
Mhm.
mother, there isn't really an end per se. It evolves, it changes. Um, but it's especially that first time around. I mean, you're just thrust into these depths and it's so physical. It's
Mhm.
also very spiritual, but not in the ways that like maybe we're like you're saying trained in religion. Like it's not it's not that type of spiritual experience. So, yeah, what a wild journey.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Wild, right?
And
Yeah.
also so mundane in ways too, because half the shit you're doing as a mom is just so repetitive and like boring in a way sometimes. I mean, um, like you're in this intensity, but it's like all you're doing is just sitting while your child naps or something. So there's and you have this like pullback from society too, which is really interesting.
Mm. Mm, 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 mm.
Pull into the home, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, and it really teaches you how to find the magic in the mundane, I feel, in the
Yeah.
routine and yeah.
Yeah.
Before I had my daughter, I never appreciated how much liberty I had, to just go and sit at cafes and write my books and drink coffee and stare out into space. And now it's just like the moment I have a window to just go and write and drink my coffee at a cafe, it's like the most ecstatic. It's the most ecstatic feeling ever. It's like totally beats, the feeling after an intense ayahuasca journey. It's like my whole body's just vibrating and in joy because it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it
Um,
changes your whole concept of time because you're on 24 hours of the day. I mean, you're in need, you know? And I'm curious too, because I feel like so many mothers come up against these sort of taboos of mothers having specific energy needs that are belong entirely to her, not to her children, not to her partner, not to women who haven't had children yet. Why is that so threatening? I feel like still there's not getting that full recognition it needs that of what really happens to her spiritually, emotionally, energetically when these needs are treated as selfishness.
I think it also comes back to what I was saying before is because we don't have an awareness that the baby and the mother are one.
Mm,
Um, like it's actually not just the mother's needs, it's the baby's needs. Like the state of the mother dictates the state of the baby. And so if we actually knew this, we'd be pouring all of our resources and, our education into like ensuring mothers actually had capacity to raise their children in a way that
mm,
was nurturing and in a
mhm.
way that they had their needs met because it directly entrains into the child's nervous system. So I feel like it's this split in understanding, like this separation between mother and child, like there's the mother, there's the child. I think it always enrages me when um like fathers, for example, don't preferentially, or like not even just fathers, but families around the mother don't actually nurture or feed the mother. They're just trying to, hold the baby and look after the baby. It's like, okay, don't you actually understand that they're one unit? Like, in order for the baby to be nurtured, actually the mother has to be nurtured, like even just the development of the baby's nervous system, like that's directly stemming from the mother's nervous system. So it's just this weird, bizarre um, concept that we have, that the mother and the baby are separate, and that we can support the baby to thrive without also supporting a mother to meet her needs. Like, we should be pouring our energy into holding the mother and ensuring they're resourced and fed well and, having time off to like come back to themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, what does that resourcing look like?
What does that resourcing look like? Uh, I kind of talk about like the 5 bodies you would know in spinal attunement. So physical, emotional, mental, soul, spirit, which make up the whole human being. This is more of an integral way of looking at the human psyche, is looking at these different layers of being. So really needing to look at nurturing all of those different parts. A big fundamental part for women and being resourced is looking at like ensuring that they're not actually physically depleted. So nervous system care, like massages, body work, um, being held is a big one. Like having co-regulation themselves. I mean,
Mm.
co-regulating with the baby is a big one also, but that's not always regulating. When the child's in distress, for example, they need to be held themselves. So whether that's actually physically, having touch is a really big one, or whether that's just, yeah, having people that are close to you, around you, like holding you and nurturing you. Um, and then also ensuring adequate like mineralization of the body, and diet's really, really, really important, because we're obviously, yeah, like drastically having our minerals and vitamins drained during particularly pregnancy, but also during that breastfeeding period. It's just like, yeah, your hormones chaos. And the body's just, can go into depletion very, very quickly. Uh, so Dr. Oscar Serelak, I don't know if you know him, but he has this theory that postnatal depression is actually postnatal depletion. It's the woman not getting adequate nutrition, not getting adequate sleep, not getting adequate holding. So if we're able to, look at these core things like, yeah, the holding, the sleep, the nutrition, then she's able to stay more regulated. And then that obviously is supportive of that mother child bond.
Hmm.
I
I'm
mean,
curious
sleep's an
too.
interesting one actually, because I'm very blessed. Well, I should say I am blessed, but I also feel like it is a part of what I'm talking about here. But my daughter would sleep through the night. She'd go down, 8:30, which is reasonably late, but then she'd sleep through the night and wake up, usually after me, actually. I would get up early, do my rituals, and then she'd wake up. And really, I put it down to the fact that, during pregnancy, I was doing so much work on my autonomic nervous system. Like lots of nature walks, body work every week. Um, just really focusing on like insulating myself, coming back to myself, and really nurturing myself during my whole pregnancy journey. And it's actually during pregnancy that their brainstem develops. Like, they say that at the time of birth, their brainstem is nearly fully developed. And the brainstem is actually what dictates sleep cycles, REM cycles. A lot of their baseline nervous system cycles are inherent in the brainstem, which is already developed at birth from
Mm.
pregnancy, which is huge. But
Yeah, I
because
didn't
I
know that.
was yeah, it's wild. But that was my focus during my pregnancy, was just coming back to my own center, not working as much, just, like, really focusing on nurturing the connection between myself and my child, and also just, yeah, like, maintaining a sense of peace, I guess, like, tuning out from the chaos of the world. Um, I was way more internal during pregnancy, and, yeah, as a result, I feel like that actually set up my baby's sleep cycles to be this way.
Mm.
So I don't feel like, yeah, blessed, but also it took a lot of work for me to and a lot of dedication during my pregnancy to set that up. Um, so
Wow, interesting. Never heard that about the brainstem and sleep
mhm,
cycles.
mhm.
Love that.
It's also where a lot of our serotonin is produced in the brainstem, and, like, it does play a bit of a role in circadian rhythms as well, although that's also, like, the hypothalamus, but it sets up a lot of our, like, baseline instinctual nervous system development and sleep development. Yeah.
Wow, so interesting.
Anyway, the reason I was saying that was because I was talking about, like ensuring that a mother gets sleep, and, um I was like, "Well, that's all well and good, but if the child's not sleeping, that's really quite challenging." And I feel like I wanted to refer back to that, like how you can actually set up a lot of the sleep cycles of your child and set them up to be more regulated in their sleep cycles through what you do in pregnancy.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and I think too, so much of sleep is because women again have been very much conditioned to separate during sleep and
Totally.
have other demands and pressures, and like that's inevitable to some degree, that you're going to have other pressures in life that your baby doesn't have, that they can sleep and you're not necessarily going to be sleeping when they're sleeping. But the fear mongering around co-sleeping and just encouragement of separation, bottle feeding, things like this, really do play into, like, I just think, like, there's the actual literal sleep, but then there's the exhaustion and stress that's coming, like you're saying, from a dysregulated nervous
Totally.
system, which happens when you're separated from your baby. Yeah, that's inevitable. You feel that disconnection in the system.
And and we blame the baby. Like, the baby's not sleeping, the baby's, like,
So true.
constantly getting up. It's like, "Okay, what's happening in your nervous system?"
Yeah.
My whole practice and, dharma in the first couple of years was, whenever something was happening, if my daughter was going through some kind of behavioral issues, okay, before I try and modify the behavior, I'm gonna come back and look at what's happening in my own system that she's
Mm.
reflecting, because we're one unit, one energetic system. So there's gotta be some kind of break in myself first. I've got a kinesiologist that works on both of us, so she'll work on me, she'll work on Cerulia at the same time, and guaranteed every time after the session, I've shifted, behavior's gone. So, like, yeah, I just don't like demonizing children for having behavioral issues. It's like, okay, let's look at the mother, let's look at the family unit and what's happening there, let's look at the environment, because the child is just the amplifier of whatever's happening in their surroundings.
Yeah.
And
It's
they don't know what's going on. Like, they're just, a feeling, sensing being that hasn't even had their prefrontal cortex develop, so they can't override their instinctual body. So they're just reflecting whatever's happening in the mother or the family unit, usually the mother in the first 2 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that perspective. It's so powerful. Anything else you would say about these other bodies, like the soul level, the spiritual level, the needs of mothers?
Mm. Yeah, like, yeah, a lot of, like, feedback I've had from mothers is that, during motherhood, you just don't have time. You don't have time for spiritual practice anymore. I know myself, like, I used to meditate for hours before I had my daughter. And now it's like meditation is so rare for me now. However, it also isn't, because I've basically, what motherhood has done is it's brought me back into finding how to meditate in daily life finding how to create a connection to the spiritual in daily life. And instead of like taking time out to do, have my spiritual practice, which I also do, I get up earlier than my daughter to ensure that I've got a morning ritual, because I know that if I just get thrust into daily life and wake up at the same time as her and she's got all of these demands and she wants things of me and I'm like, I haven't even unplugged from my dream state and come back to my center yet. Like, you know, I just end up cranky and like an absolute bitch. Um, so I make sure I get up earlier, like even if it's just half an hour, and I have tea ceremony
Mm.
for me, and that's my meditation. But it's also, like sitting in the shower and using that time to I drink my cacao in the shower sometimes and just have like 5 to 10 minutes of, and I feel like you can more powerfully use shorter moments to align spiritually. You don't need, 2 to 3 hours of practice to do that. And you learn how to be more skillfully resourced in being present. And for me, a big part of this has been time in nature with my daughter. And that's how I regulate myself. Okay, let's go for a walk in the forest.
Yeah.
That's, the moving meditation becomes so important. So finding ways you can co-regulate within the
Hmm.
practice of motherhood.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really a lot of what we teach is short practices that are profoundly energetic and spiritual that you can do with your baby. You can do them imperfectly. You find the ones that fit, and really in 2 to 5 minutes, I mean, simple, repeatable,
Mhm.
accessible, I think is what mothers really need. And I think when you're in these spiritual communities, it can feel a little overwhelming to make the transition because, yeah, it's not going on week-long retreats, and it's
Mm,
not being able to step away for hours at a time, right? So where do mothers fit into that? And that's exactly what we're trying to do is kind of say, you can actually just fit that practice into gentle rhythms that suit your life. And I mean,
mhm.
now my kids are a bit older, but every night I still lie with them as they fall asleep. And that's one of the most profound times every single night where I'm just recollecting the
Mm,
energy, tapping into the body energy, soothing breath, and going into that time together where, like, that time could be chaos, right? Bedtime is like noted as chaos for most. For us, it's become this like really powerful and yet simple grounding. There's not something special we're doing. It's
mm,
just breathing
mm.
present. And you train your quality of presence to be able to do that, I think.
Yep, totally. And the other thing I'm thinking of is like, like they co-regulate to us, but we also co-regulate to them. So how can we also teach them? So like things that I'll do with my daughter is like when she has her bath, I put magnesium and salts in the bath so that just down regulates her. And she serves tea. She does tea ceremony now. And I mean you can't do in the earlier years, but she's now 4, and she's also learning practices to develop that herself,
Mhm.
which supports me. We can share tea together and we can do these things together in mindfulness. And um, yeah, that really also supports me because we have things that, cultivate shared joy.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a part of it is your child is finding like things that you can do with them that actually also drop you into those states. Like I think because I was a parentified child, I like feel like I sometimes really struggle with playing. I really struggle with it. It's not my natural. um, and so it really takes me a lot to come into that state. But if I can find things that I love doing, that she loves doing, that bring us into, co-regulatory joy, that is also like an incredible mindfulness practice.
Mhm.
So it's just finding those meeting points as well, where you can drop into those states of presence with your child.
Yeah, I love that.
And for me, it's been it's like moving away from toys and more towards nature based activities. That's like a big one. for us.
Absolutely. Such a game changer.
I don't
Yeah,
want
my
to.
kids
I don't
might
want
be
anything to do with the toys.
feral and covered in mud, but they were outside all day. And that's to me probably been the biggest nervous system regulator for my children is just all the time outside, all the natural light that they get, and they
Hmm.
don't get sick hardly at all. And I
Totally,
don't really think
totally.
that's just a me thing. I think that's their connection to nature. And I feel like in the times of chaos of our world and the collapse, I'm like, at least I can give them that, is it can develop their sense of self through that lens is so important. But I'm curious, like, there's kind of these ideal rhythms and containers that you've named, but for a mom who really is struggling, feels that she's had a traumatic entry and passage through pregnancy, through birth, through these early years of mothering, like, where would you suggest that she start? What does she need at this point?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, this one, because a lot of it is about state entering these experiences. Like, I'll give you an example. My birth was anything but ideal, um, which is funny because, I had envisaged that, I'm so in touch with, and I do so much work on, de-armoring my pelvis, and I'm so in touch with my body. Like, you know, you'd think if A plus B equals C, then I would have had a natural home birth. And, but I actually, there's a whole journey that led to this, but I actually had an emergency C-section. And the reason for this was it's during the pandemic, and I actually couldn't find a home during that time. I was transitioning rentals where I was, and I had to fly back to my family home to give birth because the rental market was flooded and I couldn't find a rental where I was living. And there was just all of these stressor points. It was during the pandemic. I had to isolate for 10 days right before giving birth. I lost my business right before giving birth. The father of my child couldn't get into our state. My doula was away. My midwife, home birth midwife. There was all of these like recent changes where I was living back home, and basically they had to report in with the doctor, otherwise they got reported and um, couldn't support me. So she had to um, basically involve a doctor, even though we didn't want any doctor's involvement. But we just had to report in at certain times, etc. And part of that was, the whole idea that you can't be late, and you have to get induction at a certain date, da 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 da. So you have to actually schedule in an induction at a certain date to make sure you don't go over if you're in the medical system. And so we had to lock that date in for me to go into hospital if I hadn't given birth by that date. And that was a prerequisite in order for my midwife to support me.
Wow.
And if she didn't follow that guideline, she would have been reported and lost her job. So it was just this whole thing. And my daughter didn't want to come before that date. She was like, nope, I need 3 more days. And I knew she needed 3 more days to come naturally. I could feel that she was not ready. And I was also not prepared to go into hospital to be induced. I was like, I'm absolutely not doing that. But I also had an instinct that I didn't want a free birth. I wanted a midwife with me. Like, I just
Yeah.
had a knowing that I had to have someone with me. And so I was like, I'm in this pickle where, like, if I don't go into hospital to be induced, then she can't support me at home. So let's just try to do some things to bring the labor on. Um, so I was doing everything you can possibly imagine and brought the labor on early, before the induction date, because I was not going to go into hospital. And because I did that, I never dilated. I was like 48 hours, intense contractions, no dilation. Because my daughter was like, I'm not ready. I told you I wasn't ready. I need 3 more days. And so never dilated. She started to go into distress. And then I had to end up having a C-section because she started going to distress. But the thing was that before I went into hospital, etc., I'd been doing all of this work around entraining my nervous system through visualization to be okay with whatever had happened during birth. So I was visualizing, okay, if this was a possibility, if I had to go into hospital, which I don't want to do, I don't want to be in the medical system at all, can I visualize myself feeling safe, secure, connected, and at peace during that process? And so I did all of this, I did some EFT and visualization work around every possible scenario that I had fear around.
Mm.
And so when I went into the hospital system and had this experience, I had a really beautiful experience with it all. And I came out and I felt really fine about the decision and my journey of having a C section. And as a result, I don't actually feel like I had to recover from any trauma through that process. And I also don't feel like my daughter was impacted by it at all. Um, and so for me, that kind of like set up my understanding that, a lot of it is state. It is the state that you're in when you're experiencing something traumatic. And so, yeah, I say this because if you are a mother and you're pregnant and you have fears around how your birth's going to go, because birth is totally out of your control in many ways, it's good to gain an acceptance over and work with somatic tools to actually entrain a sense of peace and safety in whatever the scenario is that plays out. Because I know that this has happened to a lot of women like me that say that they did all of the work and still the birth was, you know, totally unexpected and traumatic. So, can't control what happens, but you can control your state, your nervous system state during that whole experience, which is actually more important than the experience itself.
Mm.
And in saying that, many people do have physiological trauma. Like childbirth is a traumatic event inherently. Like you split open, like your whole body it goes through physical trauma. And so we have to treat it as such. And I think it's wild that we don't treat it as such. We treat when a veteran comes back from war, we treat that as a traumatic event, but we don't see birth as inherently traumatic. And whilst, yes, it is incredibly beautiful and expansive, it is physiologically traumatic on the system. And actually, there's I'm not going to get the stat right, but there's a high stat of women in the first 2 years postpartum of being in PTSD, or they call it CB PTSD, childbirth PTSD. And it just goes totally unrecognized because, like, there's so many changes, so many things unfolding. Your mental state changes anyway. And people just see women in that stage postpartum as being a bit crazy, or, it's just like, it's just the birth, or it's just like, that's just how it is. And it's like, no, actually, they're recovering from immense trauma and we need to treat it that way. And so women actually do need touch work, they need somatic work, they need to be, like I was saying before, nurtured and treated as like vulnerable during that period. Uh, so yeah, it's having rituals like closing of the bones and rituals to really consolidate and validate your experience, spaces to be heard in your experience and witnessed in that. But not only just through discussing what's happening, is like the somatic work is just so
Yeah.
important in that postpartum recovery window.
Yeah, I love that you're describing this combination of like visualization, somatic work, tapping, EFT. This is exactly what we do on the app in our birth preparation
Cool, great.
throughout. I mean,
I didn't
so
know that.
early
I wasn't
on,
just.
like even early as the first trimester, like
Mhm.
becoming aware of these held beliefs and these stored traumas and navigating them and then visualizing them and bringing it into the body and nourishing the intuitive response and supporting the
Awesome.
nervous system and kind of really gently, simply like layering in all of these practices so that by the end of your pregnancy, at the birth threshold, it just feels intuitive. It feels like
Uh-huh.
you have this giant tool set that are, again, simple, repeatable,
Uh-huh.
short, but That's exactly what I did in my birth preparations. Journey was
There you go.
EFT, was visualization, was and I didn't have anyone telling me to do that. It just was like this impulse.
Same.
And yeah, so I really strongly stand behind that. And I feel like it's such a game changer because I had some really unexpected things happen in my birth, even though they on the outside
Mhm.
didn't seem very traumatic. But because I was able to kind of hold and contain my own power within my nervous system, I just felt like I was able to just ride waves out. But it's
Mhm.
hard to know exactly where the surprises are going to come in because we just don't know.
Mm.
It's one of the great mysteries.
And I think, for me in particular, like I drew, what are they called? Those, drawing it with my hand. I'm trying to
Like an
remember.
infinity?
No, the mazes,
Oh, the labyrinth.
the labyrinths, thank you. I did the labyrinth practice before going into birth of just like intuiting how my birth process was going to go. And it was interesting because I got to a certain point, it was just dark. And it was
Mhm.
like, you can't know past this point. But as I was doing it, like certain things came through that practice, which was about, the importance of having the midwife there and like um, just the importance of surrender. Because I am someone that's such a strong advocate for doing things the natural way and where possible. This is what I live and what I teach.
Mhm.
I had so much resistance to, yeah, as I said, hospital birth, but also um, like medication, epidurals. I was like, I'm not doing any of that. And my mum, like, just had a raw primal birth with me. Like, it's why I believe I have so much life force. I just came into the world and she didn't take any drugs or anything like that. And um, yeah, so that's, the way that I wanted to do things. And I think almost it was like the universe's way of showing me surrender. It's like, okay,
Mm.
this is the situation. We're going to give you the situation that you're totally averse to and opposed to, and you're going to learn surrender in a different way.
Yep.
So, as someone that's like doesn't touch like allopathic medicines, like maybe has had Panadol once in 20 years, um, I had an epidural and I had pain relief, and it was all like showing me that it was just showing me surrender, basically. It's like
Yep.
you're going to surrender to what it is that you need in this moment. And even I had my mother there with me, supporting me during the birth, and because my doula was away, and the father of my child couldn't get into the state because it was pandemic. And the one thing I said that I didn't want was my mother in the room, but I had to surrender to that, and it was profoundly healing. And also
Mm.
the experience of surrendering to having pain relief was profoundly healing for me. So it's, yeah, we need to go beyond the idea of what we want and just like have or surrender to
Yeah.
the fact that birth is going to be our teacher. It's going to teach us. And
Yeah.
that's not always in the way that we expect it to or
Yeah.
want it
I
to teach
agree.
us.
Yeah. There's medicine in the process, and I don't really know what it will be. But truly, it, I think, is a teacher in stepping into motherhood where you it's a force letting go because now your child moves in this world outside of you. And when we get trapped into like ideology and dogma and black and white thinking about how birth should go, but we're living in a world that is nuanced, we have to meet that in some way. And I fully agree that there's just not one singular path toward the best birth outcome.
Hmm.
It isn't just healthy baby, fuck the mom's health, but
Mm.
these teachers of ours, and how when we go into the body, we do things like the labyrinth practice that you can actually identify, at least come up to that threshold a little bit of the mystery, and understand that there's really greater powers at play. And well, super beautiful. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom and your personal. I'm just really grateful for your sharing. and being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. So nice to see you.